All right, hello everybody. For today's lesson, we're going to be going over Task E, Ground Reference Maneuvers. For the references for today, we're going to be using the PHAC, the Airplane Flying Handbook, and then our POH just to get the maneuvering speeds. So, let's look at why do we learn ground reference maneuvers? Why does it matter? They look fun, they look cool, but what is the application? What's the use? So, firstly, they teach us attention diversion. Being able to look at the ground, at our aircraft, at our instruments, back, forth, and being able to say, okay, all right, the ground looks good, let's look at our speed's good, let's look back, all right, the ground looks good, all right, let's look at our altitude, is my rate good, is my turn good, all that. So being able to move that tension back, forth, while maintaining positive control of the aircraft is one thing that we learn. Along with that, it builds flight skill. Being able to do that is going to make us better pilots in the end. Being able to constantly say, all right, let's do this, all right, I know what I'm supposed to do, I know how to control, all that works great on building our skill as pilots. Thirdly, it applies to real maneuvers. Looking at S-turns, looking at turns around a point, looking at rectangular patterns, these are all things that we learn that are going to apply when we're doing it in our traffic pattern, when we're flying around a point, when we're going along a road to capture, let's say, footage, let's say taking photos. Crop dusters use rectangular patterns. Let's look at highway patrol, flying over roads to catch speeding cars, and everything like that. So in total, it applies to real maneuvers. These are things that we learn here in our smaller aircraft, but will apply to us even when we're in the airlines. And then it teaches us control of the plane in adverse conditions. Looking at wind is the one thing that really sticks with us when we're doing these maneuvers, because being able to control for the wind, it's always going to be different. You're never going to have the exact same crosswind, the exact same tailwind. So being able to control when you have a 20-knot crosswind or a 5-knot headwind that is constantly moving as we're moving with or against the wind. That's what teaches us to control the airplane with that wind and really strengthens our skills as pilots. So how does the wind affect us? Looking at our Airplane Flying Handbook figure 7-1, I recreated this. I'll show the board at the end again just to make it better, or just to get better visibility. But with no wind, when we're flying one heading, our course is going to be generally the same. With, let's say, a 10-knot crosswind coming in from our left, now our heading that's straight on is going to get pushed by that wind, and now we're flying a different course even though we're maintaining the same heading. So how do we correct this? We put our wind correction angle, which is something we can calculate, or something in the aircraft, especially the G1000s, that will tell us, is we fly a heading into the wind, and now even though we're flying into the wind, our wind's pushing us along the correct course, going straight up like we wanted to, even though we're not pointed that direction. So wind's going to affect us when we're flying with a crosswind. With a tailwind, it's going to speed our ground speed, or increase our ground speed. With a headwind, it's going to slow our ground speed, and then same with any crosswind, any quartering tailwinds, quartering headwinds. Now, and let's look at turn around a point real quick. When we're holding that point, if there's no wind, we can hold it perfectly fine just going the way we are. But if we maintain that when we get a crosswind, now when we start, we're going to have a bit of a downwind. When we start, we're going to have a bit of a tailwind. When we turn our first turn, we're going to have a crosswind that's still pushing us even though we're going along that same route. And now we have a headwind when we do this turn. It's going to shrink, or it's going to turn our circle into this lazy, weird, awkward circle that's constantly shifting from the wind. Now let's look at how does bank and speed affect us in a turn. So let's say we're doing this turn around a point and we want to increase our bank angle. It's going to speed up the rate that we do this turn and decrease the radius, because now we're doing it at a sharper angle. Think of these fighter jets and all that are flying in really sharp, tight turns. Their radius is generally small given their speed. Now, if we decrease that bank angle, we're going to go at a slower rate, but we're going to increase that radius, because now we're not going as sharp. We're kind of doing this lazy long turn that's going through. Same with our ground speed. If our ground speed is increased, our radius is going to increase too, because now we're going the same bank, but we're going faster. We're not catching up with our ground speed, and that's keeping that radius large while decreasing our rate. Inversely, if we decrease our ground speed, we're going to have a increased rate, but a smaller radius because we're going slower. We have enough time for our bank to catch up and make that radius smaller. Go ahead and take a drink real quick. So there's a lot of factors that are affecting us, which is why it's so important to learn these ground maneuvers, because we learn how bank constantly affects us, how our speed constantly affects us, how wind changes everything as we're flying our aircraft. So what are the ground reference maneuvers? For private pilots specifically, we're going to be going over S-turns. There's a road, we're going to be turning a turn into that road, going up and around, crossing that point directly 90, and then going again another S-turn, and that's what makes it an S-turn, is we do that S maneuver. As for a rectangular pattern, this is simply flying a box rectangle, an upwind going into our crosswind, downwind, our base back to our upwind, which is how we fly our patterns for any airport, left or right traffic. And considering this, there's also the 45 entry. So let's say you're flying towards Shafter, you're coming at a weird angle, you can't directly join downwind for the runway, or you can't join a final to land on the runway. You're going to join that 45 angle to get into the downwind, then fly your base. And turn around a point is our last one. So let's say you pick a really big house or a really large tree, you're going to be focusing on that point, constantly looking back and forth as you're doing that turn into that tree, keeping that rate and radius as you're flying a constant turn around that point, which is turns around a point. Again, this all matters about bank, speed, our wind. Let's say we're doing our S-turns, we're flying, let's say our wind's coming from up, or this direction, sorry. We're gonna be flying into that wind. Now our wind's gonna be pushing us towards the road. We're gonna be flying a faster tailwind, so this is gonna go out further. We're flying away from the road now, and we're flying back into it, slowing us down. Wind's going to be affecting that S that entire way. Same with our rectangular pattern. Let's say we have wind on the crosswind going into us. That's going to push us towards that towards that runway, shortening our upwind if we don't hold it out long enough. And then on our downwind, if we have that wind, it's going to increase that downwind, shooting us further away from our point. Same with the base. As we turn that base, if wind's coming from here, it's going to be pushing us away from that runway, making that final even longer. And let's say you don't have power, you're doing a emergency landing. Being able to account for winds is what's going to keep you landing the aircraft instead of getting pushed too far away, and now you're not going to make final. So again, learning winds is very key, very crucial. I've already talked about how wind affects turns around a point. So I cannot stress this enough. Learn how to fly with the wind. So again, why do they matter? They teach us real life applications. That S-turn teaches us correcting for winds throughout multiple turns. So the wind, as you're doing an S-turn, you're going all the way around. You're going to be affected by the wind as you're going in, as you're turning, as you're going back out to the road, back, forth, and you're being able to constantly adjust for that wind as the winds stay or even as they change. For a rectangular pattern again, that teaches us traffic patterns, coming into an airport, coming in with winds, being able to know the different points along that traffic pattern. If they tell you to join crosswind and you don't know what crosswind is, learning the rectangular pattern is going to tell you, okay, if this is the runway, crosswind is this, our downwind's that, our base is that, our final is that turn back into the runway, and then we land. Simple as that. Turns around a point teaches us to roll with the winds and to turn with the winds. So as we're doing that point around one point, we want to keep it consistent. We want to stay the exact same radius from that point. Being able to adjust for winds as we, again, get pushed away. Let's say we're going to turn this a bit sooner. Now we're getting pushed to the side. We're going to turn into the wind earlier. Now we have this. We're going to fly this further because fly this faster because we have that headwind pushing us away. We need to keep it consistent, catch up with the wind. And then flying this out as we're turning away because now the wind wants to push us towards our point. Turns around a point teaches us winds as we're going through one constant turn. S-turn teaches us winds as we're going through different turns. So what are some of the common mistakes? I'm going to go ahead and swap over. Is lack of attention splitting. Being able to keep your attention consistent between the ground, between our aircraft, our speed, our altitude, and going back and forth. We learn proper focus diversion as we're doing these maneuvers. Now let's look at the second one. Incorrect corrective action. learning the effects of the wind is crucial because, again, if we have this, let's say we have a tailwind and we say, I don't know how to fly against a tailwind, I'm going to go ahead and increase my speed. You're going to worsen the effects of that wind. Being able to correctly act with the plane to correct either wind or even your own mistakes. Let's say you're doing a turn around a point and you're turning in too sharp, you have to know, okay, I need to either decrease that bank angle or increase my speed to catch up to that turnaround point. Uncoordinated flight, spin entry, even stall entry, all that. Being able to fly coordinated is something that you learn as a pilot as you're going through the motions, as you're constantly gaining more and more hours. You slowly start to pick up, okay, I need to add some rudder to either the right side, to the left side, to adjust for these winds, to get the correct angle. To be able to fly coordinated, you're just going to slowly, naturally do that instinctively as you're flying through the air, or as you're flying. Looking at low maneuver nervousness. I wrote this point because I remember back in my privates, I was very nervous when it came to low maneuvers. Looking at the ground, especially during turns around a point, I'm like, wow, this feels weird, because something we learn is that you fly or you go towards what you're looking at, what you're instinctively heading towards. So looking at the ground, I'm like, wait, this feels weird because I'm turning, but it feels like I'm turning towards the ground or the ground getting closer, even if it's not. Being able to understand that you're controlling the aircraft, that you're the pilot, that you're the one who's maneuvering the aircraft during that turnaround point, during that S-turn, and saying, okay, I got this, I know what I'm doing. And that especially hits during commercial, during our 8s on pylons, where depending on our speed, we have different altitudes, either closer to the ground or farther away from the ground. You get even closer and closer if you're when you're doing the maneuvers. So you have to understand, I am the PIC, I am controlling the aircraft, I know what I'm doing. Another one is doesn't clear the area. Always make sure your area is clear, no matter what you're doing, whatever maneuver. You could be 10,000 feet in the air, you could be 2,000 feet off the ground. You still need to be able to say, okay, this area is clear. I did my clearing turn. I looked around. I didn't see anybody. I don't see anybody on the radar. I know that I'm in a safe area to do a maneuver. Not clearing that area is always going to be risky, even if there's no one there, because someone could enter that area, and if you're not paying attention to that, you could hit another aircraft, and we do not want that. Lastly, I'm picking an improper point. So as you're flying through, if you're doing turns around a point, you need to be able to say, okay, this tree or this small house is perfect. You don't want to choose something like a large farm or a barn, because, again, it's an odd shape for a single point, especially if it's really long or it's odd positioning. Same with the S-turns. You want to be able to pick a straight line road. If you pick a curvy road, then you're doing S-turns in a weird manner, because instead of going that straight line, doing that perfect S-turn, you have this weird kind of windy road where you're like, I kind of lose my point and lose my focus on that straight line. And then rectangular pattern, being able to pick a clear flat space. A good thing with rectangular patterns is if you're flying in a straight line, you could use ground roads to be able to reference, okay, these are my downwind angles, these are my upwind angles, my crosswind, all that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and show the board off real quick, get all those notes. Again, I'll send a photo later. Kind of hard to angle this, but these are all my